To date, this question I like to hear is what's one of the bigger challenges you've encountered in growing and running your firm?
There's challenges every day. There's always something that is going to come up with having a large number of cases and a large number of employees. I can't tell you there's one certain thing. It's just that every day you're going to come into the office and every day you're going to need to fix something and address something and change something. So, luckily for me, I'm okay with change and I try to be open-minded, but it's like I got to listen and I got to figure out what's wrong. And then I have to actually do something about it and usually make a big picture change.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. We've got a great guest today. We've got Natanya Brooks, who is a personal injury lawyer here in the Atlanta area. I've known her for a number of years now. We are both Georgia Tech grads. We did not know each other at Georgia Tech, but we've got that, and I think that's sort of helped us connect here. But I've known her since the early days of her firm, and there's been a lot of growth, so I'm excited to explore some of that today. But Natanya, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what you do, sort of a little bit about your firm, how big it is, where it is, that kind of thing.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Jonathan, for having me. I am excited to discuss everything with you today. I am the owner of Brooks Injury Law, so we only help people who have been injured, but we do all kinds of injury cases. So anything from a wrongful death, medical malpractice case, all the way down to a small car wreck. And we have different attorneys across the firm that specialize in premises cases or truck wreck cases and all of the different types of injury cases that there are.
So I know a number of personal injury firms also do workers' comp. Do you guys do that?
We don't.
Okay.
We tried it, and I think workers' comp is a volume practice, so we were not ready to do that at our firm. So it wasn't a good fit right now for us.
All right, so let's go back. So I mentioned earlier, you went to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech does not have a law school. Did you always know you were going to be a lawyer? Why did you choose the law?
No, I never thought I would be a lawyer. Even currently, I sometimes wonder how I ended up here. But I was actually a swim coach when I applied to law school, believe it or not.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. You were a swimmer in college, and we'll get to that in a minute. And then you graduated Tech, but then I think you had a gap. So there was a time, some people go straight in. I took about a year and a half off, which was awesome. But how long did you take off? And then what triggered you? It sounds like you were a swim coach. What triggered you to say, all right, I'm doing something that's going to be law school?
Sure. I actually thought I would get my MBA. I never thought I would go to law school. I never thought about law school. I got my degree in business at Georgia Tech. I love business. I always wanted to do business. My plan was to go straight into my MBA. And as I got deeper into school and had really good professors, they told me that it would make more sense to get real world experience before getting an MBA. So I listened to them, but it kind of threw my whole plan off track. So I had many years in between trying to just what my next steps would be. When I graduated Georgia Tech, I didn't have a job. I had never had even an internship. All I had ever done was swim and coach and give lessons. So I did a number of different things within the few years after Georgia Tech, but I traveled back until I ran out of money. I worked in finance. The person that sits across from the dentist, my light just went out. The person that sits across from the dentist that sucks the spit out of someone's mouth, that's the chairside dental assistant. I did that. And then finally I was a swim coach and I was working at a country club in Atlanta, and basically everybody at the country club, they were all attorneys. And as I either taught them how to swim or their kids, they just said that they really enjoyed being a lawyer. It was a great career. They would write me a recommendation. So I ended up getting recommendations from all these people that I worked with at the country club, and that was the route.
It's funny. I have a similar route. So I wanted to go get an MBA. I wanted to go into finance. I wanted to do all that. And somebody told me you can't really go straight from undergrad to MBA school, or at least not a good one. So they're like, you're going to have to go work. So my dad was a lawyer, and I was like, I am not going to be a lawyer because I already know about that. And so I took some time off. I traveled. I did all that. And the same thing, I ran out of money. So then I was like working temp jobs. And then I ended up, somewhere, and I was like, all right, it's time to get serious. And that's when I was like, all right, I'll do law school. So I'm with you. I feel you. Similar
That's
journey
why you
there.
were nodding. You're nodding like you understood.
Yeah, oh
You knew
yeah.
exactly.
But it was fun, it was good. And when I went to law school, I was a little more serious maybe than I would have been. Maybe not. But all right, so you end up in law school. And the other thing, I saw a post that you did on LinkedIn or something, and I did not know this, but your daughter, or your first daughter, was born before you graduated. So you were pregnant during law school. Law school's hard enough. Pregnancy's hard enough. Put them together. Wow. Well, that must have been pretty tough. So tell me about that.
Everyone thought I was crazy. I got married before I went to law school, since I didn't have, I didn't go straight through. It was, I guess, a non-traditional route. So I was already married the summer before I started law school. So I'm a few years into my marriage, and I didn't plan it. I never even thought about having kids, but it's they talk about women having this ticking clock. I don't know, something some switch flipped, and all I could see were kids. I mean, I would go to the same beach I had been to every single year, and I never noticed a kid, and all of a sudden that's all I noticed. And I just was like, I'm ready to have kids. I just knew that was what would be true to myself at that time. And then everyone said, you're in law school. And I said, who cares? There's never going to be a good time. It's always going to be hard. And I thought, well, it's my third year, and I already was working at the firm that I planned on working at when I graduated. So that was good. And I was able to switch all my classes to evening classes since it was my last semester. So I basically, when Harper was born, I stayed home all day with her. And then my husband would come home, after he finished at work, and then he would take her. Then I would go to class all night. And it was a blur. It was really hard.
I imagine so. But so that was your last semester, thankfully?
Semester, yeah. And then I had to study and take the bar with a
Oh,
newborn.
oh gosh.
That's
Yeah.
a whole other story.
Yeah. It's timely. I guess the July bar, just for timestamp, just happened. So everybody's been talking about that lately. So that, yeah, I can't imagine that too. I mean, you've got sort of the distraction of a newborn basically, and you're trying to study for the bar. You must have been stressed out of your mind.
Yeah, I just said if I don't pass, I'm not going to retake it. It's just not for me. I said I'm going to burn all these books, and I just gave it all I had. And I said this is just, there's nothing left in the tank. And I don't know. I was, before they had points, I probably passed by half a point, but
Pass is all you need, right? Yeah.
right.
Okay, so you graduate, you pass the bar, and then you said you had a job at a firm. What kind of firm was it? What kind of work were you doing?
I was doing insurance defense. And so I had a really good friend in law school whose dad had an insurance defense firm, and he helped me get an interview with him, and I started working there my 1L summer. And then I really liked it. So I worked there my 2L year, my 2L summer, my 3L year, after when I was taking the bar. And then I worked there for years as an attorney. And I was just very lucky to have that experience and have great bosses. I got a lot of trial work. I worked on cases all across the state, and I learned a ton.
That's a good thing about like an insurance defense. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to get a lot of experience, generally speaking, fast. I mean, they're just throwing you in the fire. So it sounds like you got some trials and probably hundreds of depositions and, everything in between, right?
That's exactly right.
So you did that for a while. Now, at some point, you said, all right, I'm going to start my firm. So the first question is, did you have a feeling you were always going to go start your firm? You just didn't know when? Or was that something that just sort of happened? Tell me about how that came about.
No, actually, I never planned on being an attorney, and I never planned on starting my own firm. I just, no, it was like a gut feeling, and I didn't know what I was doing or how I was going to do it. And a lot of people said, similar to when I was going to have a baby in law school, I'm going to start a firm. You don't know what you're doing. How are you going to do this? But I just like trusted myself that I would figure it out and that I didn't need to have every single thing planned, that it would be hard and I wouldn't be perfect. And if I was okay with that, then I could figure it out. And it was like a out of body experience almost. It wasn't a plan.
Well, you were interested in business before, and I know you dabble with some other business things on the side now. So I guess it may have been inevitable that you were going to start a business of some sort, right? Maybe.
It makes total sense now. Like
Yeah.
hindsight, like okay, because I was always into entrepreneurial just things my whole life, and I was like, how does law fit in with all of these other business interests that I have? So now it's like just the perfect collaboration of the two.
And so you started the firm. You also switched sides from the defense to the plaintiff side. And so, another post that I read that you had sort of, I think maybe when all this was going down or sort of near that time, you had sort of a cancer scare. So tell me about that. That sounded pretty traumatic.
Yeah, I was pregnant with my second daughter, and I went in for my first ultrasound, and the doctor found a huge mass on my ovary that was 10 times bigger than the baby. So she said, your baby looks beautiful. I see the heartbeat. And then she said, what on earth is that? You never want to hear your doctors. She
Yeah.
said, there's this huge mass. And so they started monitoring me. I had to go to a specialist, and then every week there would be imaging done. And this mass, it was just growing and growing and changing. And so the radiologist thought nothing does that unless it's alive. And when it's alive, it's cancer. And so he told me I needed to have an emergency surgery because if I let my pregnancy progress any longer, then my body would, like when I go in for the surgery, could think that it needs to give birth. And then I, would be going to labor early. So basically, this is my window. The mass was to the point where I needed the surgery. If I waited any longer, I couldn't have the surgery. So, tomorrow I go in. I remember coming back to the office and having to send in all of these emergency leaves for all of my cases, and then going into the hospital at 5 a.m., being ready for surgery. It was supposed to be laparoscopic and something simple. Of course, it wasn't. They couldn't use the robot they had planned to use because the baby was in the way. So they ended up having to ditch that. The doctor was a specialist to use this Da Vinci machine on me, and they couldn't even use it. They had to end up basically doing like a full abdominal cut, like a C-section, except that I was still pregnant, and take out the mass. There were some other complications. So they were keeping me open longer than they had planned to, which is scary for the baby. And then when I woke up at the hospital, all of my doctors were there. I had my OB, the radiologist is there, the surgeon, and we got a call from pathology because they sent the mass to 3 different pathologists. The phone call that they took, they said that it was not cancer. And my surgeon said, Natanya, look at my arm. He said, I have chill bumps, and I saw it with my own eyes. I thought it was cancer. So they're basically all at my bedside because they knew how bad it was. And then it ended up not being cancer, but you still go through all the same emotions and all the same fears. And especially in my situation, I was pregnant, and they were telling me that I would take chemo pills while I was pregnant, which I didn't even know was a thing, but apparently it was. And so you're mentally prepared to do all that. Obviously, it was a huge relief, and it was like a catalyst in my life to really think, what am I doing? What do I want to do? Life is short. What's important? And what changes do I want to make? I have another chance that I really appreciate after going through that.
That's scary. My wife and we had a similar issue. Our daughter had cancer when she was in the womb. And so, I remember the night before the surgery, you probably had this, it was the speech, or maybe it was the morning of, the speech that the doctor gives you, basically, to CYA, all these bad things can happen. And you're just sitting right before, and you're like, what? Why'd you give me that? They probably gave you that speech, right?
No, I mean, I remember I was sitting like in this conference room, like a long conference table. I mean, I can remember it. I was just in there by myself, and I'm just like crying as I'm reading all these things that are going to go on. And yeah, nurses explaining all these things, and you're just like, okay, I mean, I guess I'll move forward.
Well, happy ending, no cancer, Your daughter's here and great, right? The pregnancy.
What about everything with you guys?
It all worked out. I mean, we were lucky. Our daughter was born with cancer. She ended up staying in the NICU for like 5 months after she had a trach. It was extremely traumatic. And like you, it was like I was a zombie for probably a couple of years. But everything's good. She just started high school this week, so all good. So you have this, I mean, I'll call it I don't know what you call it, but a moment where you're like, everything could be crashing down, like everything, including your life. And that led you to sort of said, hey, I got a second chance. And so you're like, all right, I'm going for it. How long after sort of the recovery and all that, you said, all right, I'm opening the doors?
The recovery was like 6 weeks. And so during that time, I couldn't even sit up. I was in the hospital for a week, and then I had to use a bedside toilet, and I couldn't do basic things. And then, I couldn't drive. And even when I was able to get back to getting in the courtroom, I couldn't even carry in like a red well full of papers because it was too, I couldn't hold something that was over a pound. And then when I had my first trial, I remember I had to go to my car and lay down, put the seat all the way back and lay back because I was in so much
Oh,
pain. And
man.
so like going through that part of it and not knowing how long is it going to take to recover. Am I going to recover? And am I going to be able to pick up my daughter again? The daughter that was still in my stomach, like, is she going to be okay? What effects is this going to have on her? So I think during the recovery process is when I really started understanding like what is pain and suffering and what matters. And I'd only done defense work and I'd never had surgery. So when I got into the position where I had to have a surgery and I had gone through emotionally, mentally, physically, the things that are involved with surgery and recovery, then I just really started to connect with that experience. And I felt like I could give an authentic voice to it because I knew it. And so that's when I decided I loved what I was doing. I loved being in the courtroom. I loved the law. I loved the advocacy, but I just wanted to be on the other side and I wanted to help someone who had been through what I was going through.
That's really interesting. I had not even thought of that. But going through that, the empathy and the experience, you can connect with your client probably on a much deeper level, but then you can communicate it to the jury much more effectively than somebody who probably has never been through it. And you try cases, right? I mean, you recently, I read in the paper, got a pretty good verdict here within the last, I don't know, couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things that I love. I love trial. I just love everything about it. I love working with the clients, and I love just like the competition of it, the adrenaline of it, the teamwork, the late nights. I don't know. I love the whole trial experience, having an opportunity to represent a client in a life-changing circumstance. The pressure's on. It fits with like I don't know. There's some things you get so honed in on. There could be 500 people watching you. You would never know. That's like trial for me. Once you get into it, everything else disappears. You forget about your emails. You just get really present. So I just love trial. I love helping other people get ready for trial, like coaching with mock trial or other people at our firm that are getting ready for trial. I just love being involved with it. But then I also love the teamwork aspect of it. So yeah, I personally like it, and then I like just it a big part of our firm. And there are a lot of people or other attorneys at the firm now that are great trial attorneys and that are just doing really well. So just being involved with them is also really fun for me.
Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So you mentioned being competitive. So let's go back to your college days. You were a swimmer in college. So you are a competitive person, I'm sure. You were a college athlete. The other thing I'll point out is you graduated Georgia Tech in 3 years. Is that right? How the hell did you do that? I mean, it's unheard of without sports to graduate in 4 years. Everybody's on the 5-year plus plan. How did you do that, first of all?
So a combination of a lot of things, as I'm sure you can imagine. When I was in high school, I was from Georgia, and if you stay in state, then you can do something called joint enrollment. So when I was a senior, I started taking college courses at Georgia Premier College, which was right down the hill from my high school. So I took a bunch of courses there, and then I took AP classes. And then when I ended up graduating, I already had 12 hours that counted towards my degree if I went to school in Georgia. So since I went to Georgia Tech, those transferred over. Then I was taking classes over the summer. So like my first summer, if I was coaching, one summer I stayed at Georgia Tech and I trained, and I took my science that summer because it was a 4-hour course and I had lab, and I just really needed to have the time, which is hard with swimming. So I did that over the summer. And then I took a course one summer when I trained back at my club team. I took a course at Georgia Perimeter College. And then one semester at Georgia Tech, I took 21 hours
Holy crap.
while I was swimming. So
Whoa.
it was a lot, but I don't know. That was probably crazy.
Well, that is crazy. The other thing, so, I swam growing up, but I was on swim team 1 year. I was not that great, but my nephew was pretty good. And I just know how much he swam. It was like early mornings, every morning before school. I know how hard it is and how hard you train. I can't imagine what it's like in college, and then just the endurance and probably the pain you have to go through to do that. So I'm sure that experience, number one, it's tough, and it's probably sort of set you up to endure some other things like we've already talked about. But looking back at your college days, your competitive swimming, does that translate at all in, your practice or running the firm? Are there any parallels or anything, any lessons learned?
Yeah, 100%. I think doing a sport or just something where you're super engaged and dedicated and determined, I think that it's like it directly translates to the real world. I think for me, probably the biggest thing is just learning to be resilient, which is really hard. And life is hard, law is hard, trials are hard, everything is tough. And with swimming, I was kind of trained my entire life that you work really hard every day. You go to your swim meet. If you do bad, it doesn't matter. Like, you still have practice the next day, right? You don't get any days off. You can't miss practice. You do well, you don't, you just get back up the next day and you do the same thing. So I think for me, it's like there's going to be hard days, but you don't quit. You just come back in and you work hard. You get back on your feet. Something else doesn't go how you want, you get back up the next day and you come in and you just keep at it. And I think that's the most important thing, because some days you just want to throw your hands in the air. But I think my whole life, I'm used to just, there's tough things, you get let down, you just get back up and you don't.
Yeah, some days you just want to sleep in, right?
Yeah, but that just wasn't an option. I mean, you just couldn't miss practice.
So have you ever sat down and tried to figure out how many miles you've swam in your life? Have you ever done that?
Never done that.
It's
I
gotta be.
It would be so many miles.
I mean, do you think you've cracked 100,000? Or, I mean, gosh,
Oh,
yeah. So do you still swim at all now? I know you got your kids, your daughters, do they swim?
Yeah, they swim. Both my kids swim. My oldest daughter, her sport of choice is tennis, and she's really into tennis. My younger daughter is super into swimming. So it's been really fun to me to be able to stay in the sport and watch her swim. And even my oldest daughter that likes tennis more, she'll get into swimming. And so that's been really fun. And I still swim. I try to do some open water swimming, which I love, like being in a lake or the ocean. And so I'll try to do something like triathlons or some kind of open water event. And yeah, I just swim for fun. I just enjoy it.
I imagine it would be a huge stress relief too. I mean, trials are stressful, running a firm's stressful. You go out and swim, a few miles, and it's just sort of get it all out, right?
Well, you're underwater. It's like you're in your own little world and no one can talk to you. There's no phone, there's no emails, and it really is therapeutic, I think, to kind of be under the water like that.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent. It doesn't matter necessarily what it is, but, everybody needs something that is that release valve. It's good that you've got that. So another thing you mentioned, you said the teamwork. And I know that at your firm, teamwork is a big thing. So I guess, first of all, how many people are at your firm now? How many lawyers? How many staff?
Including me, we have 8 lawyers, and including me, we have 21 people.
So that's big. That's getting there. So how do you stress the teamwork? I mean, the bigger it gets, the harder it is. There's always that contingent you got to bring into the team. So how do you manage that?
You're right. It's like it is harder, but when it goes right, it's beautiful. When all the pieces work together and everyone is in their right spot and everyone has a common goal, like one person can't do it all, right? I mean, it's very hard. There's a couple of special people, but like really you need people with different skill sets to work together. So I found that even though it's hard, you have two different people and you have them going towards a common goal and they're good at different things, then you kind of have the whole picture. You can do everything on the team. So I think as a team, you can accomplish any goal, no matter what it is. You have somebody on that team that can do it, that's good at it, and that enjoys it. The normal person is not amazing and enjoys every single part, every case.
And you know, so on the teamwork thing, something that you did that is a little more unusual, I'll say, compared to most other lawyers that I've ever really encountered. When you started your firm, you had an operations person sort of from the early days, maybe from the first day. And most lawyers don't start out that way. And I remember having a conversation with you, and I may misremember, but you were like, I want to try the cases, I want to do the legal work. And you had this other person, Mark, who's sort of your operations guy. So it's back to your point about different people having different roles in the firm. I'm curious though, I mean, you've had in about 6 years, it started with, was it just you and Mark at the very beginning?
And Anna.
Okay, and Anna. So it started with 3 people, and so in 6 years you've grown to 8 lawyers and 21 people. I mean, that's good. So how did that work, and how did you guys divide that? And for people out there that are thinking about bringing on sort of an operations person, sort of tell us your experience.
A law firm is a business. I mean, you have HR and you have all of your systems and you have hiring. You have, like for us now, we got a building, we got contractors. It's not just legal. I mean, part of it, that's only part. Once you have a certain number of people, there's a lot more to it. Lawyers typically they're not business people, right? Like we have someone who is a business mind and who gets things done and who likes numbers. That's a different kind of skill set than a lawyer. Lawyers usually, they like to read and they're good at talking. And like, again, it's back to the teamwork, which is you want to have somebody who understands business and numbers and all of the other parts to the firm, in addition to law, to grow, in my opinion, because otherwise everything, again, just can't fall on one person. You kind of have to divide up, and different people have different strengths and kind of do it that way. So that is kind of what I always saw that made sense. I do think that a lot of larger firms, I know on the defense, there's typically a CEO of some of the larger firms, but I'm sure maybe for smaller firms, I probably did that sooner than most.
Well, it worked. So kudos to you. So you mentioned you got a building. I know you guys moved into a new office. So I guess, did you guys buy the building?
We did.
Okay. Now that's cool. So this is a debate that I see from time to time on LinkedIn, and just I've talked to folks about it. Do you buy a building or not? And then there's a camp that says, oh yeah, that is just the best thing you can do. And then there's a camp that says, I don't know, it limits you. You might run out of space, blah, blah, blah. So what was the thinking behind you guys buying a building?
I just personally, I like real estate. I think it's a really good investment, and it like gives me energy. I mean, people invest in different things. Like some people like to do the stock market and they like to watch things move. And I personally enjoy investing into the firm, like investing into people and, bringing in someone new or being able to elevate someone within the firm. So investing into the firm. And then I think that it makes a lot of sense to own a building because then your costs are fixed for that building. Whereas if I'm leasing and then every year it's going up further and further, and then when your contract runs out, right, you kind of just, if you want to stay, you're at the mercy of the landlord, and they tell you can't do certain things in the parking lot, you can't have a heater in your office. I don't know, there's rules, which I also don't like. So there's a lot of perks to owning real estate, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And for me personally, because I enjoy it. For someone else that maybe sucks the life out of them, it's a lot to deal with. But like I even like moving. I mean, it's crazy. We moved in this week and there's a million things to do, and I'm drained, but I'm also happy. And some people would probably be drained and miserable, but I think it's like a personal decision. But I do think that it makes sense business wise to do it. And it was always a goal. And I don't have any regrets yet. I'll keep you posted.
Well, congrats on the building. And for people that are sort of in the Atlanta area, I think, do you have extra space if anybody is interested in finding a spot to sublease or lease?
We thought about it and we decided to just, keep it our firm. So, it's security too when it's just us. And again, you're in complete control of who's in and who's out and who people are meeting with versus you're renting out some space and then who knows who's in and who's out and what's going on. So it just felt security wise, safety wise, keep it all just our practice. Anyone is welcome. Anyone can stop by and pop in and grab an office for a day, but the plan right now is just to keep it our firm in here.
Well, that makes sense. And it also, you mentioned you have the ability to sort of do what you want. And there's another thing I've seen is, and we'll get to this in a minute, but I know your daughters come to work a lot. And so I think you had a playroom maybe at your old office. Are you building out a place here for them to do whatever?
We have stuff here for the kids. It's insane. But of course, they have a playroom here. They got a PlayStation 5, which I've never even heard of. So apparently that's, the newest Nintendo. But there's like couches and there's a ping pong table and there's a stand-up shuffleboard and I forgot what it's called, another game where you roll balls. There's an arcade game. I mean, it's just like I want to be with my kids and I also want to work. So if my office space is a place that my kids don't mind being for a couple hours a day, then I get to see them more. So for me, that's important.
That's cool. And then everybody else can take a break and go in there. And yeah.
Work doesn't have to all be serious all the time. I mean, of course, there's so many serious and stressful moments, but there can also be some fun moments and some enjoyable moments. And, that's possible.
Well, I'll tell you, one of my favorite posts that you did, I thought was awesome. I think you were there at your old office on the weekend, prepping for trial. You're in the office, papers everywhere. And then you get your video out and you start walking down the hall, and in the office is a bouncy house and your kids are in there going crazy. That's incredible.
Well, I was trying to think, how do I hang out with my kids this weekend? I know I'm going to be in the office all weekend. I have to put in the time and I have to read all these medical records, but I want to see them and I want them to be happy. And kids love a bouncy house. I mean, my kids, you give them a bouncy house, they'll stay all day. And then it just kind of became a tradition. They would pull out the bouncy house, and like we got the bouncy house here in the new office. Since we have a larger parking lot and we can do whatever we want here, we have just bought a commercial bouncy house.
Oh, man.
For the parking lot.
Oh, that is awesome. I guess you could have a party. I mean, that's, get everybody to bring their kids.
Absolutely.
But you're going to get a lot of insurance, right? Just in case.
We have a lot of insurance.
So let me ask, did the landlord complain at your old office that you had a bouncy house in their building?
I don't think they ever knew. Okay. If they knew, they would probably complain.
Yeah, that's sweet.
But we did want to do something outside, and they said, no, it's not your parking lot. So.
And so we just touched on another thing that I've seen you talk about too, and it's, it's not work-life balance, it's work-life integration. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what it's called. I had to look it up. What is this called that I'm doing? But yeah, I mean, it is what it sounds like. It's just kind of, you do it all together. And I think if I look back in my whole life, like I've never wanted to choose. I've always wanted to do both things. You can either do A or B. I'm like, I want to do A and B. So I've done it throughout my life, different friends. I have my swimming friends, my school friends, and my family. And I would want everyone to be together. And I would want to do events and have everybody there. And I think that's kind of what this is, where I don't want to choose. I really enjoy working. I really enjoy kids. And that's probably what it was in law school. Like, why do I have to choose? Why can't I do law school and a kid? Now, it's going to be hard. It's challenging. It's not easy. But this is my attempt to have it all, is just kind of pile it all together and hope it works out.
Well, you're doing a good job. So let's get back to your firm. So I want to talk a little bit about your firm model. I know you try cases. I know that's what you like to do. And I think, what was the verdict? 1,600,000, 1,900,000 recently?
164.
So yeah, congrats. That's great. So obviously you do trials, but tell me about your firm, what the business model is. It only trials? Do you do some pre-suit? Is it high volume, low volume, mid volume? How's the firm set up?
So the firm is set up to handle everything from the first day of an injury, so pre-suit, all the way up through Court of Appeals, high courts. So we have paralegals that specialize in pre-litigation. We have attorneys that do pre-litigation. We have litigation attorneys that specialize in litigation, and then we have appellate counsel also that does complex cases and that handle everything up in the Court of Appeals. So we take a case from A to Z. There's no switching firms or sending it here. And we kind of switched models, as we've grown and learned. We used to have, pre-lit, and then we would have a separate pod, I guess you'd say, for litigation, and the case transfers over. And what we've been able to do for the last few years is to train everybody, train the paralegals, get training for attorneys, and be able to, now what we're doing is the case stays with one team the entire way. So the attorney knows how to handle pre-lit and lit, and the paralegal knows how to handle both as well. And then for a short time period, we have a trial team where if a case is going to trial, you just need extra help. So the attorney that's worked it up, the paralegal that's worked it up, they of course know the case well, but you just have to have extra people. You have to have people helping with the CPTO and with the motions in limine and with the charges. And so at that point, we kind of add in, some more people so that when we go to trial, we have just people who can do every single piece of the trial.
That's interesting. I know a lot of firms that sort of do have the pre-lit and lit, and there is some knowledge that gets lost in the handoff. So that's interesting that you guys tried that and then you sort of switched what you got now. That's interesting. And so again, you've seen a lot of growth in the last 6 years. And I know personally, and I know just from talking to a lot of attorneys, growing's hard. It's not easy. I mean, in theory, it just sounds easy, but because you need people and people are difficult. It's hard to find them. It's hard to keep them. It's hard to keep them engaged. So how have you gone about? How have you done that?
Luckily, I love people. I just always like people. Even if I watch a TV show at night, because we always joke about, what do you watch? I like reality TV. I like people. So that has been something lucky for me because, yeah, as you grow, you have so many different personalities. And as I have matured, you kind of realize everyone doesn't think the same way as you. So for me, if I say I like change and I like the unexpected, and everyone here says, we don't, you're the abnormal one. We want to know what's going on. We want more lead time with things. And so, yeah, it's like you got to know every single person, who they are, what their personality traits are, what makes them happy. And then I have to be able to understand that and address it and know that I don't want cookie cutter. I don't want everyone to be the same. So if someone thinks differently, that's not a bad thing. They're bringing something to light and something for me to think. And I think for me, I just have to stay like very calm and steady and open-minded and care about people. And then I think everything else just follows from there. If I'm able to do that, because we all want the same thing. Everyone wants to be healthy and happy and help people, right?
So it's a couple of things. You mentioned the reality TV in my house lately. My wife and daughter, the Bachelorette, The Bachelor have been on. Now I'm going to watch it in a different way. I'm actually going to pay attention. I can get some people skills from these shows. So I'm going to try that. So
you see like real emotions in real time.
Yeah.
You see people's you can see them thinking and then feeling and them expressing and then other people reacting. And yeah, there's so much to learn.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to, over this weekend, that's what I'm going to do. So your role in the firm, as you've grown the team and you've learned how to manage the people and manage the personalities, sort of what is your role? I know you try some cases, you do some legal work, but what else do you do in the firm?
Right. So my role has changed so much. I mean, I went from being the only attorney and I was taking every single deposition and I was in a depot almost every day to now it's very rare for me to take a deposition at all. So in just a short number of years, it's a huge change, and I'm still, trying to understand and make the changes myself. But I'm more, I'd say, managerial at this point, where like my job is to put together the teams and to meet with the teams and to help everybody get where they want to get. So I have amazing attorneys, amazing employees, amazing paralegal. Every single person that I work with is somebody who is just incredible. So how do I help them be the best version of themselves? What can I give them, or what do they need from me to help them? And then I'm just, letting them do their thing and supporting them. And then for me personally, outside of that, I'll work on trials if I'm brought in, like, to help someone. Like, I have a trial coming up in a month where I was brought in to help at the trial. So that would be something that I would personally do. But outside of that, I'm not on any case. It's going to be the attorneys that are at the firm. And sure, I'm getting all the notices, but they're running the show.
So let me ask this. I've talked to some others that have made the transition from sort of practicing attorney to more operations or management, whatever you want to call it. And, some love the change, and others have sort of almost this identity crisis. They're like, I was the lawyer and now I'm not. And it's sort of a hard thing to grapple with. What about you? What kind of experience mentally did you go through? Was it easy and you're like, hell yeah, or was it tough?
Well, luckily, I like both. Like, I like the litigation, and I also like the business. And since I still am doing some trial depots and some trial work, I'm getting the part of the law that I really like. But I think that in a managerial position, it's like more big picture thinking. If I am focused on one trial and I'm helping one family, but if I can work to help 8 attorneys all have their own trials and their own clients, then that's 8 families that are being helped. So I think for me, like, regardless of an identity crisis, it's always hard. You're trying to understand what makes you happy, but I think that it's better for, I think it's a better decision for me to help get everybody else where they want to go than for me to just focus on where I want to go personally.
I'll tell you, for me, I like to learn new things. I like to be challenged. And, a case, running a trial, whatever it is, at some point you sort of, there's always something new, but you've sort of mastered it. But running a business, there's always some new curveball coming your way. So you're just constantly, which I like, sounds like that's probably something you like too, right? It's sort of back to your competitive nature and working hard, and you just keep going, right?
I feel like trials like that also. There's always something that comes up at trial also. But yeah, I mean, there is so much to learn in the law. There's so much to learn in business. I'm definitely not lacking for things to learn.
So let's switch to marketing and bringing in the cases. So, to grow as big as you guys have, you have to get the cases. Now, you don't have to give us your secrets, but, maybe tell us sort of your approach to marketing and maybe some lessons you've learned over the years.
So I started with 5 cases. They were 5 cases that I had brought in, somebody knowing a friend. And then I built the business because I had come from the insurance defense side, where you only are an attorney on the case when the case is in litigation. So I knew how to litigate. I knew how to try cases. That was my skill set. A lot of attorneys didn't want to do that. So they were really good at the marketing and the business, but they didn't want to try the case. So I started taking cases that needed to get filed. So once another firm tried to get a case settled, they couldn't, they would send it to me and I would file it. Or if they filed it and they tried to settle it and they still couldn't and it needed to go to trial, then I would take it for trial. So I built the firm by referrals from other attorneys specializing in litigation. And then so I started getting cases in that way. Then I realized that if I really want to make sure that everything is done right, I got to get a case from the beginning. And there's a lot of things that have to happen at the beginning and during treatment. And if you get a case, X, Y, and then you want to do something good at Z, you can't really do much. It kind of is what it is. So I wanted to be able to bring cases straight in. So I started trying to figure out the marketing piece of it, which it's very hard. So at one point I had 11 billboards. I tried billboards. I decided that I would commit to it for 6 months and see if it worked. And it did not work for me. And I tried TV. So 6 months of TV ads all around the main news stations, the main times, didn't work for me. I committed for 6 months to an outside marketing firm that was doing just internet marketing. Didn't work. So where I am now, I decided to hire and have someone on staff that does marketing. And so she knows me, she knows our firm, she knows everybody else, she sees us every day. And to really go for like a genuine, authentic marketing where, I mean, the goal is still to reach people, but we're doing it being ourselves and showing people who we are and creating like connection. And so that's what I'm doing now. That's the thing that I have enjoyed the most. And I think that is what has worked for me personally.
So you're on, I know you're on LinkedIn. You have some good stuff there. So that's, I mean, you got some really good quality posts there. I recently joined Instagram, so I know you're on there. I sort of looked at that a little bit. What other sort of social channels or YouTube or what else are you?
Basically, if there is like a platform, then I'm on it. And again, it's just, I can't give enough credit to Taylor. She is our media person, and that is her job, and she knows it. She's so good at it. And she just gives me ideas and works with me and helps me. And I send her stuff, and she knows how to put it out there on every platform. So every single platform is different and different sound bites and videos and pictures. They work differently, and it's very complex. It really is. So you've got to have an expert. You got to have somebody who does it full time and understands it.
That's so true. I mean, I feel comfortable with LinkedIn. I know, I'm not the best, but I know my style. I know sort of the rules. I know sort of the way it works. And like I said, I recently got on Instagram and I don't know anything about it. I've never been on it. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do. And I'm like, I need to learn this somewhere. And then you start adding channels. You got Twitter and then Facebook and this and that. And it's just like, it's too much for me to learn on top of doing everything else I'm doing. So you're lucky you've got somebody there to help you. And from what I've seen, it looks good. All right. So let's talk about sort of running your firm. So to date, this question I like to hear is, what's one of the bigger challenges you've encountered in growing and running your firm?
There's challenges every day. There's always something that is going to come up with having a large number of cases and a large number of employees. I can't tell you there's one certain thing. It's just that every day you're going to come into the office and every day you're going to need to fix something and address something and change something. So, I mean, luckily for me, I'm okay with change and I try to be open minded, but it's like I got to listen and I got to figure out what's wrong. And then I have to actually do something about it and usually make a big picture change. So, all right, this one thing happened. Now, it's not usually about the one thing, right? The one thing happened because you don't have the correct process. And then what is the correct process? And then how do we implement? So, it's doing that every single day in a million different places.
Yeah, that's scary for some folks, right? And other folks like it. So you mentioned earlier that, buying a building was always one of your goals or part of the vision. So you've accomplished that now. That's great. Congrats again. As you look to the future, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, what do you see? What's the vision for the firm?
Well, since I love trial, I always have, trial goals. When we started the firm, I wanted to be able to have a 6-figure verdict that we got at the firm, and then a 7-figure verdict that we got at the firm. Once we've achieved that, now I would like the firm to have an 8-figure verdict. I would like every single attorney at the firm to be on a trial team that has achieved a 7-figure verdict. So at this point, I'm looking at, what cases do we have going to trial? Who's on it? Who's part of this team? How do we get everyone participating and opportunities? Because I have really good people that I want to work with forever. And so it's my job to give everyone opportunities. And I want each person to feel just that joy of getting a client, doing something life-changing for a client, being able to see it all the way through and knowing a person and helping and being part of it and working with a team to actually see it all the way to a jury trial. So that's a firm goal that I have that I'm hoping to achieve.
Well, that's cool. So are you still growing, or is it just organic? Or
It's actually always been organic. I have never had any goals with growth. I don't have any now. I never did. I always just wanted to do the best job for every single client. And we grew because someone would come in and say, we have a med mal case. And I had zero plans of starting a med mal team. I didn't personally have experience in med mal, but we started getting clients who needed help in med mal. And I met an attorney who wanted to do med mal. And that's just how it happened. It wasn't a plan. It was just, look, there's a need. We want to help. We know we can set it up and learn it and do a really good job. And that's how everything has happened. So, I mean, there's no ceiling. If we get clients and we have opportunities and we can do it, then I'm not going to say no. I'm going to grow and expand. I don't know how or in what way. It's going to be all organic.
that's really a good point for the people out there. Sometimes you have a vision and a goal and you're like, this is what we want to do. And then you can work to that. That's one path. And sometimes you have that, but then these opportunities sort of fall in your lap. And I think the trick is to know which ones to ignore and then which ones to pursue, because not everyone's a good one. But it sounds like you've been able to do that. It's the opportunity arises and you're like, all right, let's do that. So good job.
I mean, it's also trial and error, right? I mean, I make a lot of mistakes. I make mistakes every single day. So every person is always trying to do the best they can in the moment, right? So with the knowledge I have, I try to make the best decision. If it's a wrong decision, then I try to, do better the next time and learn from it and just like keep pivoting until I find the right path. So it's not like, oh, it's just been, I've always got it right. Absolutely not. I've messed up tons of times, but if you just get back on your feet and try something else, well, at that point you have a lot more knowledge, and then it's easier to make the right decision the next time.
It's like in college when you had that bad meet, you had to go to practice the next day, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, cool. This has been fun. So for anybody out there that wants to find you, get in touch with you, how can they find you?
So email is always great, ncom, and then our social media handle is at We Care Law.
Is that for every platform? Oh, wow. That's cool. You got the same one for every platform. Good job. That makes it easy. All right. Well, I encourage folks to follow you. Like I said, your LinkedIn posts are great. So keep that up. And thanks again for coming on. It's been fun.
Thanks for having me. Great to catch up with you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.